When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max when his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law Lena looked me right in the eye and said with a chilling smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. I, who for 3 years had paid their monthly rent of $500, bought every piece of furniture in their house, and filled their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. I was not a special person. I stood there in the living room of my own house, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Lena made herself comfortable on the sofa I had bought for them. The pale pink dress I had picked out for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the illusion of being part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, thinking about how nice I would look in Max's wedding photos in which I would never appear. For weeks I had planned every detail. I had put money aside to give them $1,000 as a wedding gift. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to tell her the good news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of that collapsed in a second with those 4 poisoned words. Only special people. Max finally lifted his gaze and said in a rehearsed-sounding voice, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos on social media. I saw Lena's parents proudly posing next to the bride and groom. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. I saw Lena's white dress, which I had helped finance with the $800 I had given her last month for her personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Lena called me with a completely different voice. She was no longer the confident woman who had excluded me from her wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Renata, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says, if we don't pay this week, he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled slightly as if the world were ending. I was silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had run to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I had eaten beans and rice so I could give them money for their desires. And now, after they had excluded me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Lena," I said with a calm that surprised even me, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so deep that I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, it was not I who was trembling but her. "Renee, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies. Wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings, which I had helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years I had this constant feeling of walking on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping to get a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something in me that had been dormant for far too long. I had calculated in my head how much money I had spent on them in those 3 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was over $20,000. $20,000 had taken from my retirement, from my savings, from the money my late husband had left so I could live my last years in peace. And what was all that for? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night after I hung up, I sat on my bed and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for all the times they made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence a hindrance, my money the only thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who had lost herself, trying to be indispensable to those who considered her dispensable. When I woke up the next morning, something inside me had changed. It was not just the pain of betrayal. It was something deeper, colder. I stood up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes as always, the same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving love without getting it back. But there was something else in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, as I had every morning for 40 years. But this time I didn't think about calling Max to ask how he had slept. I didn't check my phone in anticipation of a message from him apologizing for the previous day's humiliation. For the first time in a long time, I was my own first concern of the day. I sat at the table where I had so often planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, and cried silently when they treated me with indifference. Now, this table would be a witness to something completely different. I took out my checkbook, my bank statements, and started to do the math. I wanted to see in exact numbers the extent of my own foolishness. Monthly rent of $500 multiplied by 36 months was $18,000. Food and supplies approximately $200 a month was another $7,200. Birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, anniversary gifts at least $3,000. Lena's medical emergencies, $800. The car loan they never paid me back, $2,500. The air conditioner repair in their apartment, $600. The living room furniture, $1,200. $33,400. That was the exact sum of my generosity. $33,400 I had wasted from my husband's inheritance, from my pension, from the savings I had put aside penny by penny for decades of honest work. All that money thrown out the window to keep two adults comfortable who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang and I saw Max's name on the screen. Normally, my heart would have pounded as I ran to answer, hoping he would finally apologize and explain that everything had been a misunderstanding. But this time I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Finally, it fell silent, and I continued drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time it was Lena. I let it ring too. Then a text came from Max. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I deleted the message without replying. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific purpose, without an errand related to them. It was always the bank for transfers, the supermarket to buy them something they needed, the pharmacy for Lena's medications. Today I went for a walk just because I wanted to. I walked past the park where I had often taken Max as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me tight and said I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? When did I start to believe I had to buy my own son's affection? At the bank where I had so often made automatic transfers, I stopped in front of the door. The branch manager, Mr. Clean, saw me through the glass and waved. I had known him for years. He had processed every one of my transfers to Max and Lena. He had watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I went inside and walked directly to his office. Mr. Klein, I told him I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have programmed. He looked at me surprised. For 3 years, these transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. Are you sure, Mrs. Richter? Did something happen? His concern was genuine. More genuine than any interest Max had shown in me in recent months. What happened is that I finally opened my eyes, I replied. I want to cancel everything, and I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money. While Mr. Klein processed the cancellations, my phone didn't stop ringing. Max, Lena, Max again. It was as if they had developed radar to detect when their source of income was in danger. I turned the phone off completely. Mrs. Richter, Mr. Klein said as he handed me the papers. I apologize for intruding, but in all these years, I have seen you be very generous with your family. I hope you are not being pressured to make these changes. His words touched me deeply. This man, who barely knew me beyond bank transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein. On the contrary, I have finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left an enormous burden in that office. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. I went home and thought about all the things I hadn't done to please Max and Lena. The trips I hadn't taken to save money for them. The friends I no longer saw because I was always available for their emergencies. The hobbies I had given up because every dollar I spent on myself was $1 less for their needs. When I got home, I found 3 cars parked in front of my door. Max's, Lena's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside my house through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought they would one day take care of me just as I had taken care of them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to my house and saw a scene I will never forget. Max was sitting on my sofa with his head in his hands. Lena was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, and an older man I didn't know was going through papers on my dining table. My papers, my personal documents. What is happening here? I asked in a voice that sounded louder than I expected. All three of them looked at me as if I were the intruder in my own house. Lena was the first to speak, and her voice had that desperate urgency I had already heard on the phone. Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Fisher is from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? The question came out of my mouth with a calm that surprised me. What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine. Max finally lifted his head and looked at me with those eyes that once belonged to an innocent child and now only reflected financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank and they told us you can let all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that. Mr. Pfizer, a man in his 50s in a gray suit and a smile that didn't inspire confidence, approached me with an outstretched hand. Mrs. Richter, I am Dr. Pfizer, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went directly to my dining table and collected all my documents that he had been reviewing without my permission. These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom, Max interjected with that condescending voice he had perfected in recent years. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without an explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. Lena approached and tried to take my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. Renee, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Now I understood why they had brought the lawyer. It wasn't about helping me. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent and taking control of my finances. The same woman who had told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old lady. I am not confused, I said with a firmness that silenced everyone. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are going to leave my house right now. Mr. Fisher interjected with that professional voice lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that came from my throat was horsero, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding to no longer finance the lives of two adults who treat me like trash. Lena jumped up as if I had slapped her. We never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We are just speeding up the process. There was the naked, unvarnished truth. Everything I had would one day belong to them. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were just collecting their inheritance in advance. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left. To them, I was just an ATM with legs that had become problematic. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you get out of my house. Max stood up with that angry childlike face he made when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next. I can't. My voice rose for the first time in the entire conversation. Who says I can't? For years, I have paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I was not welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Fisher took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. Mrs. Richter, we have prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Max and Lena to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary until you feel better. I took the folder and without even opening it, threw it directly into the trash can. The only transition that is going to happen here is yours to the front door. Lena started to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of contained rage. You can't do this to us, Renaid. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you. Obligations based on my money, I replied. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just on my money. And now that I have decided that my money is better used in my own life, I am suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Max tried to approach me, but I took a step back. He was no longer the boy who ran into my arms when he had nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between himself and a comfortable life financed by others. "Mom, we made mistakes," he said in a voice that was supposed to sound remorseful. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Lena was nervous. I was under pressure. "We can fix this if you just become reasonable again." Reasonable? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger. It means pretending it doesn't hurt to have been excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Fisher packed his papers with the efficiency of someone who is used to having proposals rejected. "Mrs. Richter, this is not over. Your family has legal options. If you are indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge can determine that you need guardianship." His words were like a blow. I realized this was not just a manipulative family visit. It was a real legal threat. They wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. "Mr. Fisher," I said, looking him directly in the eyes, "I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after the death of her husband, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week financially supported two completely capable adults." Lena stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally showed her true face. "This won't stay like this, Renati. We have rights and lawyers too." "Perfect," I replied. "Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums." The three of them walked to the door with the wounded dignity of people who are not used to being told no. Before he went out, Max turned to me one last time. "Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it." "Max," I said with deep sadness but also with crystalline clarity, "I am already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect." As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, but not out of sadness or regret, but out of adrenaline from having reclaimed control of my own life. I lay awake in bed, planning my next steps like a general preparing for a battle. If Max and Lena wanted to fight, I would give them a war. But it would be a war I would fight with intelligence, not with emotion. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of attorney Mr. Weber, a man I had met years ago when I was handling my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Pfizer, whom Max and Lena had brought, Mr. Weber had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. "Mrs. Artur," he told me as I explained the situation, "what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation." His words both calmed and worried me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, that what had happened was truly abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was more serious than I had thought. "We have to document everything," Mr. Weber continued. "Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We will also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts." We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total sum, $33,400 in 3 years. "Mrs. Richter, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding." When I left Mr. Weber's office, I had a complete plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a security system with cameras to protect myself from future surprise visit.